1. Backstory. I live in a fairly odd duplex with a hatch in the backyard leading to a crawl space. A week ago, me and my wife began hearing what sounded like scratching and moving within the walls between the bathroom and our bedroom. We brushed it off as leaky or squeaky pipes and ignored it for the night. The next day I left for work, and during my lunch I noticed my phone was flooded with texts from my wife, frantically trying to get a hold of me. The texts began with her asking me if I came home early, to believing someone broke into the house, and ending with her freaking out about critters underneath our floor. After arriving home from a 24-hour shift, I began to skeptically investigate the sounds she heard to put her mind at ease, which is when I stumbled across the unlocked crawlspace hatch in the backyard. Immediately, I figured raccoons were most likely sleeping in the crawlspace during the day, and doing whatever raccoons do at night. Now, while I was at work, I watched a neat video on Kalahari Bushmen finding a hidden water source in the desert by tying a monkey to a tree for a day and following it to its H2O treasure after it became too thirsty to care about the man following it. This provided me with inspiration. I should just lock the hatch and open it after a day, so they are forced to leave to eat and drink, and I can lock them out. Fast forward half a day. We noticed a slurping sound underneath the bathtub after the shower. Nifty bastards, they're drinking water from a leaky pipe. Oh well, hopefully they will still be hungry and thirsty enough to want to leave immediately after a bit longer. Sometime yesterday before the end of the day, my wife brought up something quite curious. What if the raccoons got inside of the crawlspace through the hatch, and do not have the strength to lift it up from underneath? And that's why they've been scratching the walls. Fuck. I immediately propped the hatch open with a stick and threw some cooked tilapia at the entrance, fearing the worst. We watched from the living room window for a few minutes until it happened. 2 medium-sized trash bandits emerged from the hatch, with pieces of our fish dinner in their dumb little hands, and awkwardly waddled off into the woods behind our home. I shined a flashlight into the crawlspace, and thankfully, they seemed to have been the only temporary residents present. 2. I truly made several mistakes, friends. If there existed a further realm of mistake, I do personally believe the events recently experienced would top most others. It all began with my simple morning routine of waking up and eating my frosted flakes while watching some early afternoon TV. I had a job interview at 1:30, and the time was a soothing 12 a.m. When my morning meal was complete, I get dressed in some casual attire, as to not appear stuck up at my interview, grab my keys and begin walking to my front door, when I get the sudden urge to urinate. So I turn around and retreat to my bathroom, pulling my pants down when I realize I still have my keys in hand. My mind immediately jumps to the easy conclusion: toss the keys on the counter. Friends, if only it had been that easy, or lucky even. So I toss my keys, a slight jingle of metallic lock openers flying through the air for a moment, before dropping on the marble counter and sliding across it, directly into my brand new thick metal faucet, which proceeds to snap my keyring on impact, all of the keys shooting off across the counter, except for one: my car key. Remember that episode of SpongeBob where Mr. Krabs drops the penny into the sink and it falls slowly, stopping for a moment, and then it winks at him? My mind played that scene slowly as my car key dropped swiftly down the drain. I immediately whipped my penis back into my pants, erupting into a cursing battle of fucks and shits, shoving my sausage fingers into the drain as far as they could go. I don't feel the key. I put my face into my hands, knowing full well I would not be able to drive across the city in time for my job interview without my car key. In my last shred of luck, my mind jumps to the plumbing instruction guide, or whatever the fuck it was, that my dad had given me in case of a sink emergency. I sprint to my room, ripping open drawers and going through my closet, before finding the white and blue colored book. Now, pardon my French here, but this book made no goddamn fucking sense. I saucer throw that stupid book into the bathroom and run into my garage, grabbing a wrench, hammer, screwdriver, and some duct tape. I return to my bathroom and flip open the cabinets under the sink, exposing the white pipes. I stare for a moment, and then flip through a few pages, noticing the same grey bar on the pipe in the book that I saw in my sink. In the picture, which I didn't notice until after, was labelled Step 8. In some random sink fixing process, a hand was applying a wrench to the metal thing on the sink tube, with an arrow pointing in a circle around. I grin for a moment, thinking my car key is probably stuck in the tube in front of me. And with the picture from the book, all I had to do was turn it and open it. So I shove the wrench into what I assume is the correct position, and begin turning to the left, literally said righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, before turning it. The wrench jiggles and halts for a moment, so I apply a much higher amount of force into the movement. This is my true fuck-up, let me tell you. Of course, with the applied force, the metal bar thing snaps off, drenching my face with horrific amounts of water, firing from the sink tube like a never-ending cannon, drenching me and blinding my eyes, and turning my bathroom into a pond within seconds. I attempt to stand up, instead slipping on floor and driving my foot through the side of the toilet, scattering the porcelain, with a shattering smash and further drenching me with piss-riddled toilet water, and covering my flooding bathroom floor in millions of chunks of shattered porcelain. I throw my hands into the countertop and hoist myself up as the water stops shooting, before catching my breath with heavy gasps and screaming like a toddler. I look at the bathroom, the water evening out the door and saturating my brand new carpeting, and then my eyes drifting to the gaping hole in my toilet, from my slip to the floor. I step into the moist and vile carpet, which is becoming increasingly wet, and collapse on the living room floor. My landlord came to inspect the damages yesterday, and assessed nearly $2,000 for the toilet, sink, carpet, and floor. I never found my car key, missed the interview, and stayed at a friend's house that night and yesterday. I can smell the moldy carpet from the living room couch right now. 3. I worked for a small landscape contractor and nursery as a labourer, salesman, mechanic, whatever else they wanted me to do. We had a moderately sized 11 acres property where we grew Christmas trees. The trees were prone to getting spiders and praying mantis nests, as well as bagworms, so we would spray the nursery once a year with a very potent insect spray. The way we did that was to take our wheel loader, think a giant forklift with big tires that turns in the middle, and load a spray tank with a gas engine and a hose on the front, and hoist it and someone to use it above the trees, so they could spray the nursery. Before we continue, a word about my father-in-law, the foreman of this little outfit. He was the kind of guy not scared of anything. He was also the kind who did everything himself. Basically, for this job, he didn't trust anyone else to spray the nursery effectively. He also didn't trust any of the other workers to drive the wheel loader well. So that became my job. We pulled this off successfully for years, but it always scared the hell out of me, because he would end up 10 plus feet in the air just holding on to the end of the machine, with no regard for his own safety. OSHA would have a field day with us. This particular year, we had just gotten a new machine to do the spraying, with a much higher capacity tank, and a fancy electric reel to pull the hose back after you had extended it. We did our thing spraying and moving around the nursery, until we got to a section that always freaked me out, because it was uneven and made everything sway back and forth. We hit that spot fine, but he signals me he wants to go higher to get a couple trees, so we don't have to double back. No problem. I raised him a little, and inch forward, right into a ditch. It wasn't a bad one, but the height coupled with the angle the forks were at caused the new spray tank to reel and rock forward, to the point where they almost fell off. I should point out that its cradle had no bottom slats, so it was just resting on the fork instead of being supported all around. I angled the forks back to cradle the tank, which normally would do the trick. Problem was, the water inside the tank was rocking back and forth, and when I angled the forks back, almost all of the weight was beyond them, which instead of catching the tank, had the effect of flipping it like a diver off a diving board. The tank came crashing to the ground upside down, right on the brand new hose reel. Literally an hour into using it, and already destroyed. As I am lamenting the equipment, my father-in-law has been screaming and yelling at me for what I think is dropping the tank. So I look up. Nope. He's holding onto the forks for dear life. He lost his balance when the tank went over, and my overcorrection with the forks made him lose footing completely. So he's hanging like Doc Brown from Back to the Future off the end of the machine. So I panic, thinking, shit! If I drop him, I'll have to tell my wife I broke her dad. So I try to lower him down. As I do, the forks tilt forward, causing him to slide forward off the end and land square on his ass. Luckily, the entire distance was much shorter by then, but it still looked like it hurt. He took one look at me with fury in his eyes. I'm expecting a lecture or a stream of cursing or worse. He says, and I quote, "Neither of our wives hears about this." Knew right then that I was actually part of the family. Several days and one large repair bill later, and we're no longer spraying the nursery like that. 4. So this was an embarrassing night for my dad. I hit him with that double whammy. It was 1997, and I was in the first grade. We were having a back-to-school night at my old elementary school called Forest Knolls. If anyone doesn't know, back-to-school night is when the parents or guardians of their student children go to the school to meet their child's teachers and see the projects they've been working on. Okay, so let's back up about 1 week before this night. I just got home from school, ran down the stairs to my basement, and plopped on the couch next to my dad. He was watching the Redskins game, so this wasn't exactly the right time to be asking him questions. By the way, when I was a kid, I always asked questions, like too many. I was that annoying, but why kid. So my dad was used to me asking most random questions. Sometimes he'd give me straight answers, and other times he'd just say anything so I'd shut up. Well, even though I see he's watching the game, I keep poking him to ask him something. He half listens when I ask, if Pepper, who was my dog by the way, if Pepper could talk, what would she say? My wonderful dad responded with, "She'd say you were an idiot." I didn't take offense, I got my answer, and ran back upstairs. Okay, now we can fast forward back to school night. My mom and dad are in the hallway with many of the other parents, and notice a large group looking at one particular wall, laughing hysterically. My friend's mom and our neighbor Betsy waved my parents over to see what the fuss was all about. That's when my dad read it. Along with the other students posting their questions to their mom and dad with the answer, and a little drawing to go with it, mine was dead-ass in the center. There was a drawing of a big man sitting in front of a TV, and a little red-headed stick figure next to him. They both had those talk bubbles with the following, "Dad, if Pepper could talk, what would she say?" "She'd say you were an idiot." My dad was completely embarrassed and exclaimed, "Geez, if I'd known that was a homework question, I wouldn't have said that." Everyone knows my dad is a good guy, so it wasn't taken the wrong way. But to add fuel to the fire, no pun intended, on that same night, another classmate of mine's mother walked up to my dad and asked him what department he worked for. He replied, "What do you mean?" She said, "Which fire station? My son told me that David said you were a firefighter." Once again, my dad was embarrassed. I don't know what he did for a living as a kid, and just thought being a firefighter was cool. Sorry, Dad. 5. Here is the story of how I was mauled by my cat after a series of freak events that were ultimately my fault. This happened about a year ago, and I still have scars, both physical and emotional. My wife and I have a 10-year-old cat, who we adopted from the Humane Society when he was roughly 6 months old. He is generally a great cat, and we love him dearly. Our cat is normally very well behaved when indoors and hardly causes any trouble. Unfortunately, when he goes outside and smells other animals, and I assume cats, he essentially turns feral again. He will hiss and attack us and is just not friendly. He is not declawed, so this can be quite the experience. The second he gets indoors from such a state, he turns friendly again. We do not let him outside intentionally because of this. The night of the mauling, I was watching my son and my wife at a bachelorette party. She doesn't have as many friends as she used to due to kids, one then, now two, and rarely makes it out to social events, so her going to this bachelorette party was basically the highlight of her social year. I made the mistake of letting the cat get into the garage. When the cat is in the garage, he will sometimes go into feral mode, and sometimes not. I decided to try to get him back inside now, since he didn't seem mad. After a bit of trying, I succeeded. I quickly realized my mistake when the cat appeared to be slightly angry. To calm him, I opened a can of wet cat food and let him eat. When he finished, he swiped around the paper plate to bury his food, as cats will do. Unfortunately, we had let the cat's claws get a little bit too long, and one of his claws got stuck in the rug. Not wanting to get the cat agitated, I go in to quickly unhook him. I succeeded, after a little while, and freed the cat only to find he was indeed very agitated and was starting to growl. I knew that I had to get the fuck out of there, so I picked up my other cat, Fat Cat, so he wouldn't get attacked, and walked upstairs. The mean cat followed me upstairs into one of the bedrooms. I didn't want to get stuck in the room alone and get into a situation where the mean cat would hurt the fat cat. So I decided to bite the bullet, and I dropped the fat cat and picked up the growling mean cat and threw him out of the room into the hallway and closed the door. The second I grabbed the mean cat, he attacked and sunk his teeth deep into my hand. Blood was instantly, literally squirting out of my palm. I did manage to safely shut the door. My son was in his room with his door closed, so I yelled to him through the door and hallway, telling him to keep the door closed and not open it no matter what. Yelling further infuriated the cat, and he sat outside of the bedroom I was in and attacked at the door and growled like mad. Now I found myself trapped in the room with blood squirting out of my hand and no way out. Our basement is a walkout, so I was 3 floors up, and this was night, so I couldn't realistically jump out of the window without seriously hurting myself. I was losing what seemed like a lot of blood, but I called my wife and told her that she needed to come home immediately to save me. I was also worried that my son would go outside of his room and get attacked. The bachelorette party was in the middle of doing a wine and painting thing. It took quite some convincing, and me sending a picture of a lot of blood, but she told her friends that I had been mauled by a cat, who had trapped me in a room and left without finishing her painting. It was a 45-minute drive home, but she arrived and was able to subdue the cat, who had had some time to calm down. We found our other son sleeping with his clothes on in his bed with the door shut. I stained the carpet pretty badly with blood. We still have the cat since I think it was ultimately a freak occurrence that led to this to occur. The cat was on steroids to treat a temporary illness, which probably contributed to the aggressiveness. But I am more wary of him now. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Embarrassing Stories, number 50, I think. Oh, let me check. Yeah, number 50, that's right. Thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Hope you guys have got a nice weekend ahead of you, whatever you might be doing. I certainly hope, well, I'm hoping for good weather. It's a bit dull right now, though it's still quite warm. And, well, I hope you have nice weather too. Or whatever kind of weather you prefer. If you don't like sunny weather, a bit of rain if that's what you enjoy. No, one doesn't judge. Good weather means I can continue on with my work in the garden and that. If it's not, I might take a little wander up the street. I've been looking into things. I've been looking into if anyone's ever tried cold brew coffee. I never had. I've had iced coffee, but I'm looking at these videos on YouTube of people making cold brews and things. So I might go out and try and get the things I need to make that, if I can find a decent grinder locally. If I can't, I'll have to order one off Amazon. Anyway, I'll stop boring you now, so with that I'm going to head off. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.